Welcome to the Level Up Podcast, presented by The Ultimate Gamer, a show that features conversations with trailblazers, thought leaders, risk takers, decision makers, celebrities, athletes, and investors who are defining the gaming and esports space. On Level Up, we take a journey into this dynamic industry and start to decode and reveal who and what's making news. It's about connecting, and it's about sharing the stories and vision of the people who make gaming and esports a global phenomenon. And now, please welcome your host, student of the game, and connector to the esports community, Tommy Knapp.
What's up, everyone? I'm Tommy Knapp, and this is an all-new episode of the Level Up Podcast presented by The Ultimate Gamer. On today's show, I have a conversation with Dr. Debi Lemon, head of esports and academic program developer at Ohlone College. She is a professional speaker, futurist, thought leader, and esports advocate. Starting her esports journey in 2014, Debi was the catalyst behind one of the nation's very first college esports programs. With a cup of coffee in hand and an early start to the day, she's based in San Francisco, and Debi was linked into our conversation at 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. We jumped right into education in esports and building a club on a college campus when esports was just a blip on the radar. We talk about why fun isn't taken seriously and how violence in video games hasn't been proven causative to violence in the real world. She also talks about how esports is an amazing skill-building, networking, natural grassroots community that can be a very strong recruitment tool for higher ed institutions. The Renegade Esports program was one of the very first college programs in the country, and Debi shows us the blueprint to establish a legit club on campus. She is truly one of the pioneers in collegiate esports. Join me now for a conversation with Dr. Debi Lemon. When did you get into esports? When did you start being interested in gaming? Were you always a gamer?
You know, it was interesting when somebody else asked me that, and I was trying to think back, like, well, was I? And then I realized, yeah, I probably would have to consider myself when I started off with Zork back in the day, and it was the first time I saw an electronic type game. And then, of course, got into the Space Invaders and Frogger and things like that. But I never thought of it as anything serious. I think Zork a little bit, because it was my computer science math teacher who introduced me to it, and a lot of it is problem solving. And so I think I took it more seriously because he was taking it seriously and because of the way it was introduced. But after that, you know, being at home and I don't think I ever took Frogger seriously, and I don't think I took Space Invaders seriously. Right. And even later, when I was doing things like Pharaoh and Cleopatra and SimCity and Artemis, I didn't think of them as something that would be part of my career or would be, you know, anything that socially or in terms of just the industry at large was going to take seriously as anything other than just sales for, you know, toys and equipment. Yeah. So it really took the groundswell and that grassroots movement to bring it to the forefront for me and make me realize, wait a minute, you know, part of what I've always investigated even before I got into esports was the importance of play. And you hear that a lot in education, but the seriousness of it, really, why fun, maybe because it's an Anglo-Saxon short word, isn't taken seriously when, you know, they like to use words like engagement, but really it is all about play. And so esports is just like a more formalized form of that, really. And the learning curve inside of any type of video gaming, there's always a narrative and there's always a learning curve. And so you're getting a really wide variety of skills, a real toolkit to take out to the real world. And I think that just hasn't been thought about or focused. You know, nobody's researched it or looked at the focus. They're always looking at, like, does it cause violence? Because there's a lot of, you know, shooting or punching and things. And, you know, that's pretty much been dispelled, hopefully. I think there's some people who still think it, but I think for the most part, it's been proven that's not causative. But
yeah, well, it sounds like a lot of it happened for you organically. Like it just kind of happened. It's interesting you talk about that, because I had a conversation the other day with Renee Giddens, who's the executive director of the IGDA, and she had to present up on Capitol Hill about violence in esports and in gaming. And I think we've kind of gotten past that to a certain degree. Again, I think it's always an ongoing conversation. But I think just like the music industry, when it was about the lyrics and the songs that were making people go crazy, once that went through, and I think of Dee Snider and Twisted Sister, on Capitol Hill. Yeah. You don't hear nearly as much about it. I mean, there's still language, there's still violence in the lyrics in a lot of songs, but I don't think you hear it the same way. And I think, again, it's understanding that, knowing that, and I think teaching people like you and I, teaching those people that are the kids and the children that are coming up, that yes, that's out there, but that doesn't mean that's the path you have to choose.
Right. I think it kind of integrates, like you said, integrates everything. I mean, we look at traditional sports, or we look at movies and television, all of those things were accused at one time or another of creating violence in society. And I think it's just, we're naturally competitive, and then how it's expressed, depends on the outlet that you have. And then going through adolescence is always a tough time for everyone. And so, how you learn to manage that type of behavior. I even look at my guys. Sometimes we have new people come in. We have a lot of high school kids that will come in and play with our gamers, and they self police themselves. They kind of self correct bad behavior, and they'll call it out, and they sit down, and we have meetings, and they'll say, we got to talk about this guy or this girl or somebody who's behaving in this way, and what our rule set is going to be. And I'm like, okay, well, they're on top of it. I don't need to worry about it. They know it. They're directing themselves and how to make it run the way they want it to run. So
when you say they come in, so the high school kids, when they come in and they spend time with your gamers, walk us through that. Like, who are your gamers? What's the program?
So right now we have Renegade Esports, which is Renegade Esports at Ohlone, because we're not officially recognized by the school as a gaming team. Although we have varsity and JV, and as long as we're members of TESPA and some other organizations, we're able to compete.
Can you, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, Debbie, but can you tell us again the name of the school? How do you say it again? Oh,
it's Ohlone. Ohlone. It's named after the indigenous peoples that lived in the region back in the day when the Spaniards first came through. So Ohlone.
Where exactly is that?
It's in the Bay Area, so it's East Bay. So it's near, we have campuses in Fremont and Newark, right outside of San Francisco.
Okay. How long have you been there?
20 years.
20 years. Okay.
I can't believe my lips are saying that word, but yes.
But so the Renegade Esports program there, how old is that?
That we founded Renegade Esports in 2014.
Okay, 2014. All right. So would you say that you're probably one of the first? I mean, you weren't offering a scholarship at that time, but you're one of the first university programs to be.
I think we were one of the first programs for sure. And I know we got in early with TESPA, which was at that time the Texas Esports Association, which now has grown and become a national college group. But we were the largest club at our school. And because once we made ourselves legitimate, it was me coming in looking for really gamers to beta some BCI games that I thought were really exciting, and I wanted to see what students thought of it and where it might go. And at the same time, we had some league players who were constantly being kicked out of the computer centers, were being blocked on the network, and they wanted to become legit so that they could actually actively play. And they already understood the community, they knew where it was going, and we just connected at that moment. And so at that point, I said, okay, let's get a room. We had construction going in one of our buildings in the computer center, and so the whole bottom floor was gutted. And I just went straight up to the IT guys and said, nobody's using these rooms, but you've left all of the projectors and the internet's all live. Can we just use those rooms until you start work on it? So we had a year using those bottom rooms and getting them unblocked, and then starting to reach out and see, well, how many students are involved. And so we found, okay, it wasn't just the league players. We also had a lot of Smash players and Wii players, and we even had some CRTs for Melee. Like it suddenly began to grow. And so I realized, okay, the minute I saw where esports was, as I started looking at it, like I said, I was back looking at BCI, then I thought, okay, we need to have a department of esports. We have to make this formal because this is going to grow, and I want to be sure I provide the environment that's going to let it grow organically, as it already has out in the community and the industry. And then secondly, talking to the students and helping them understand that it's strength in numbers. When I was in college, that was part of my strategy with some of the different clubs, like the equestrian club. that I was an officer in, and saying we have to put everything under one umbrella because we have to look at it as not just PC games or not just console games or not just social games or mobile games. It's going to be all gamers together under one umbrella, and that's going to make a big difference in how it's perceived by the school.
And who did you go to at the school to actually make it official?
So we have a student life organization, and so we went and got a charter and became an official student organization, a student club.
Okay. And so again, this seems to happen pretty organically. And if you can, talk to us a little bit more about then how you progressed. And we're talking about the competitive side. So we're not talking curriculum right now. We're really talking about the competitive side and the club side as well as the varsity side. So talk to us a little bit about that. And then I want to know the difference between what you did back then, 7, 8, 9 years ago, and if you were going to start the exact same program today, would it look a lot different? Would you actually have a list of things? Because at this point, it feels like you said, I just walked in and there was a room and it had the IT was already set up. The infrastructure was there. It had some screens. And I just said, okay, nobody's using it. I'm taking over. I don't think you would typically go into starting a new program saying, because that just happened to be there, right?
Right.
So,
and it's still the holy grail for most colleges. I would say the biggest problem that all colleges face, unless you're really, really lucky, is to have dedicated space. And we still don't have dedicated space.
Okay.
Having a dedicated facility means it's much less expensive to have to purchase equipment. You can get towers. You're not dealing with laptops, which have to be replaced. They can't be upgraded. They can't be repaired. And then you can lock it so that this is a facility just for esports and not to be used for, writing a paper or, doing casual checking your email, that this literally belongs to the esports organization. And that's where most colleges are still struggling to establish that type of investment through the school that, yes, we will dedicate a space. Might not be as hard now. We'll get to that. But I think when we first started, it was a matter of getting the space and then setting the hours. And then some schools like ours, a lot of them, the faculty advisor has to physically be there whenever they're having a club meeting or club event, and then having to define what that meant, because if they wanted to be able to have open play from noon until 9 p.m. 5 days a week, that would mean from noon until 9 p.m. I had to physically be sitting in that room with them, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And certainly, and it's not like this is a paid position, so it definitely was a labor of love sort of thing. But the first thing I think I realized was this is a long haul commitment. This is not 1 or 2 semesters, because I had to be always looking at what my 5-year goal was, because I looked at it and said, this can really grow. This can become an integral part of the school. This can become a major recruitment tool in terms of getting student enrollment, but it's also going to give something to the community that the community already has, but could use the support and use the ability to expand it, and also to get that sense of credibility that this is something real. This isn't they're wasting their time and they should be focusing on their studies. This is a tremendous skill building, networking, community, natural grassroots element in their lives that can be integrated into any study program. So, and I'm trying to go back to where I started with the first thing was, yes, let's get the official club set up, who's going to be in charge of what, because of the diversity in the club. And so establishing officers, making sure that we were supporting any student organizations like TESPA at the time. In fact, we got invited to Blizzard's summit back in 2015, which they invited any student club president and vice president from universities all across the U.S., and we were one of those universities that came in, and they paid for our guys to go down and give feedback and talk about how we were expanding the Bay Area. So trying to support them for that, trying to come up with ways to find funding, because student funding was very difficult back then. Mm-hmm. And trying to get funding taken from, if there's a pool of money and they say, well, we have an astronomy event versus an esports event. It was definitely challenging at that point to say, no, this is very, very legit and worth investing in. Right. So how did we come up with money and saying, okay, well, you may have to, not as students, because we can't do this as students, but as individuals, let's say you want to start your own event hosting company, and then you make money through that and you want to donate equipment to our club. So here's how you make things work when you're faced with obstacles, is saying, let's think of a way that you as an individual can make this work. So they had a lot of skill building with that as well.
Well,
So,
I have a bunch of questions from there, and I want to let you keep going, but it's just on the remind me later, because I want to talk about the recruitment side. But again, on the funding side, so if you can explain a little bit more. So on the funding side, what do you need for funding? Obviously, like you said, there's an individual like yourself there needs to be a faculty or a member. So somebody, even if they're not getting paid specifically for that role, hopefully they're getting paid something. Do you need all the equipment? You need, and I don't know what all the fees are for the organizations. I do know for, I believe NACE, it's like $2,500 a year. But you've got. So tell us about the expenses. How much would it cost to start? And then when you look at the funding, I know through traditional pro sports, there are opportunities to bring in partners and sponsors to cover things in kind, right? Like
right.
PCs and the game, a lot of the gaming equipment, stuff that's endemic to the space itself. So walk us through that a little bit.
So the way that our school works, it used to be you could get $300, I think it was for the year, which is really not very much money.
$300, yeah, that's not that much money.
I didn't have to worry about equipment a whole lot at first, because we would go to different facilities. Microsoft has always been really awesome with us. They have stores, and we could go there to use their equipment. Or when we hosted our Bay Battles Expo, which is the annual event, they brought equipment to us. And then the fighting game community, the FGC almost always brings their own equipment. So that's been extremely helpful. But I realized we needed to get some. And so I did petition. I met with a lot of the administrators and, did presentations, and constantly was trying to show them where this was going, and that we just needed to get some type of investment. And one of the things about school, I was working on augmented reality projects for my other classes that I teach. And so when my computer carts got to be 5 years old, they always upgrade them. And so when I had to put in the upgrade, then I went to the new VP of IT and said, I can't possibly do any Spanish linguistics projects unless I have Alienware laptops. And we looked at each other for a moment, and he said, okay. And so he actually got me 30 gaming laptops. So we were one of the first schools to actually have equipment in our Bay Area, which was pretty remarkable, and to actually have 30.
You did that. You kind of went dual purpose. You went two different ways to actually get that equipment.
Yes.
Leverage the Spanish side.
And then, of course, they became dedicated for esports. So because most of my other students, they all have their own devices, and I try to make everything work on a mobile phone or a tablet. So it was easy to be able to say these are now dedicated to esports.
So, but when you're competing in sanctioned events, let's say, you kind of need everything to have the same settings and be on the same internet, going at the same speed, right? So that there's integrity to the game for your own players, athletes, students, as well as the ones you're competing against.
Correct. And that's a really good point, because that was one of the hurdles I had to overcome, was that they were convinced that they could not understand why I said the Wi-Fi won't work. And they said, well, we're going to put boosters around. I said, you don't understand. You can't have even the slightest dip. You can't have a variation. Everything has to be a level playing field. And this is our playing field. It's an electronic playing field. Right. And so we have to have, hardwire. We actually have to be running off of Ethernet to do this. Mm-hmm. And when I did a transdisciplinary project where I had theater, entertainment design technology, broadcasting, IT, the gaming, the gamers, journalism. We all got together and did this one Smash event. It was a Smash Ultimate event. So it was on the stage. It really looked amazing, because we have a great theater, entertainment design technology crew, and they had towers and smoke cannons. But we had to look at what we were going to need to support an event like that. And this is where, as a faculty advisor, sometimes you're going to be personally invested in it, because there's no way around getting, we're going to need 3 100-foot Ethernet cables. Or we realized we wanted to do like a Genesis style face-off for the Smash, so we had to have their 2 monitors with their 2 headsets and their mice. And we realized the controllers, everything had to be identical. So we had to go out and buy matching monitors, matching controllers, matching headsets. And so you do run into that element of it. The nice thing is once you've purchased it, it's reusable. Mm-hmm. But the upfront costs, when you start running formal events, that's when you start realizing, okay, to make this happen, I'm going to have to have really great sponsors who are going to bring the equipment to us, or we're just going to have to kind of fight it, pay for it, and then find a way to get ourselves reimbursed or raise the money to reimburse the original investment.
Right. And how many kids are in the club right now? And if you're looking at the number of students that are in the club, that probably also affects the cost of it. I guess what I'm saying is, in an ideal situation, if you were going to go to the administration and say, we have X number of kids, we need this amount of funding. And I'm thinking about other institutions right now that are considering esports programs,
right.
Because there are a lot of them, right? I mean, you were early, you were early in the curve, and now, and especially with everything that's going on, there's so many universities, colleges are understanding that this is a great place too. And I want to go back to the recruitment, because I see that as one of the number one things. If you don't have a football program. I was talking to somebody about this the other day. If you don't have a football program at your university, you can't attract football players, right? So if you don't have if you don't have an esports program, a gaming program at the college university level, then you can't go out really and attract those type of students. And those type of students typically are very strong in the STEM fields, correct?
Well, this is an interesting point. I'm glad you said that, because between 70 and 80% of all high school students self-identify as a gamer. So 70 to 80% of them aren't going to be in computer science, or aren't going to be in one specific field. Like, I look at our gamers, and I have people in theater, I have people in biology, I have Spanish students, I've got English sociology students, and that's been part of what I've been trying to build there, and working with the gamers who are very active, is to be that inclusive, because those gamers are there. But because when this all first hit universities, I'm going to go back a step. So it's been a grassroots swell, right? It's been this huge groundswell that's developed the community on its own. And it's gotten to this $1 billion level without education. Mm-hmm. So the first thing that happens with education, and I saw this happen like in 2003, I was trying to get a social media class. And the first thing educators do is, where does this belong, and what do we put it under? Like, here's something new, so we're going to put it, does it belong in computer science? Does it belong in video game design? Does it belong in athletics? Where does it belong? And this is something so large and so open that's why I went back and said, no, I need a department of esports that's freestanding, that's not niched anywhere, until we have an idea of how it's going to roll out and how we're going to integrate it into curriculum. So that, going back now to what you were saying about the students and student recruitment, is to say everybody has to feel welcome. It can't be that this is only for people in computer science. This is only for athletes like every other athlete. It's very niched. And by not niching it, you leave it open to all kinds of gamers, because right now the big thing that's coming up that, those of us who, if you're out and you're watching what's happening with gaming, is going to be the augmented reality gaming. They've tried virtual reality gaming, and I absolutely love Unspoken and In Death and some other awesome games, but they are difficult to play because you're tethered. You have to have the right environment so you don't hurt yourself. But augmented reality is definitely going to roll out, and that's going to make physical body games on top of social games, on top of the battle arena games, on top of puzzle problem solving games and real-time strategy and role playing. There's so many. And even DDR, if you've ever done DDR, that's extremely hard. I'm not particularly good at it, but I work up a sweat.
Right.
Those things, we're including all of those things because of exactly that, trying not to niche it, so that the recruitment is open, so that people understand that you can say you're a gamer, that there's not, these games mean you're a gamer, and these games mean you are not a gamer. So the path is, how do we start setting up teams that play with other colleges and build from there to make more opportunities for other type of games? Like, originally it was always League of Legends, and then it went StarCraft and Dota, and then it got to Overwatch when that launched. Now you've got Valorant, you've got Apex Legends, and a lot of the PC games translate better into a traditional sport infrastructure. You have a playing field, you've got viewers, Certainly League and StarCraft, you're looking down on a third-person team. You can see a map. Even if you don't understand all the nuances of the game, you understand the point of the game. Like, here's one end and here's the other end, and we want to take out those towers. Watching something like Rocket League is a little more challenging. Watching something like Overwatch can be a little more challenging. If you don't understand the game, you don't know what you're looking at. So those are taking a little longer. Doing something like FGC games, that's a whole different environment. They want to be together. It's more one-on-one or 2v2. It's just a whole different physical environment and a whole different way to watch it. People like to be right behind them, watching right over their shoulders, seeing what's happening. And even if it's up on a screen, they still want to be able to see live the actual players playing it. And it doesn't, if you don't know what you're looking at with Smash, it's very hard to understand the subtlety and the skill that's involved in it, or competitive Tetris, or competitive, so I think.
Well, and that, to me, that's almost the same as like watching boxing or UFC or one of those, because when you talk about the fighting game community, it looks like people are just out there throwing punches, or they're just throwing kicks. You don't realize that how difficult it is. And I mean, if you do physically, if you go into a boxing ring and you try to box for 3 minutes and you box against somebody that actually knows how to fight, you learn very, very quickly that it's difficult. And it's the same thing. I agree, because I watch FGC. I don't play nearly that much, and I haven't really figured out all the nuance to it yet. But I do. I can tell that there's a skill level, and you can tell the difference in the skill level when you see two people competing.
Yeah, I always have to remind people that remember that when you're watching these, you're watching professionals. They make it look easy. It's like watching a dancer who's really good. They make it look very smooth and easy, and then when you try it yourself, you realize, oh my God, these guys, some of them are doing, I think they're clocked out that the top professionals do about 10 to 12 moves per second with a mouse, like a PC game. That's incredible. And meanwhile, they're listening to their team members. They're responding to their team members. They're watching what's happened on their part of the map. They're strategizing what they're going to do next. It's a lot that's physically happening at that moment, and it's under intense pressure. So people watch it and they may think they're just clicking and stuff's happening on the screen, but you're right. It's like watching any other game you're not familiar with and not understanding just how challenging and skilled these people are.
Right. So just to kind of finalize that thought, what would you say, give me a range that a university college should look for if you were saying ideally how much money it would cost? And that doesn't mean they need it in cash, right? So you need $100,000 in PCs, and you've got all of that is sent to you in kind by Alienware or Origin PC or CLX Cybertron, whoever it is. Then that's $100,000 cost, but it's not a hard cost to the university. So what is that number? And then that's, like I'm saying, that's ideal. And then traditionally what really happens is probably it's a fraction of that.
Right. Yes. I think you're right in the ballpark. I mean, I was looking and trying to think, okay, when I was looking at the high-end gaming laptop, it was like $80,000. I think the nice thing is with sponsors is that if you're looking at $100,000, if you have a dedicated room, that answers most of your problems. So I would say before you can invest in one, like getting them coaches, finding them a place to play, getting them jerseys, which by the way, we're still working on that. Microsoft is kindly helping us out and helping us find some way to do it less expensively, because that builds that team sense. If there's nothing more exciting than having a uniform that says, I am officially part of a team. But without a room, it's going to be more expensive because you're going to have to move equipment around. And I try to explain that when you take equipment and you have to move it to a room, set it up, play, break it down, and put it away, it's like every time you want to watch a movie, you've got to remove your television from the wall, unplug it, disable it, put it on a metal rack, roll it down the street to your neighbor's house, and reset it up again. It's just not good for the equipment. So if you're going to invest and get some laptops and things, then you want to have a space that belongs only to esports. And it doesn't have to be a giant space. It just needs to be big enough, where you've got at least 12 PCs so that you can handle the 6v6 scrims. But yeah, I would say probably that's not too far off saying 100,000, but you can certainly do it with less.
Yeah. Okay. So
we've
now
done it with way less. And if you have sponsors that help subsidize that equipment, it's going to be even less. And by having a room where it's set up, then it's cheaper rolling forward because you're not constantly replacing equipment. You're not constantly having to add equipment. It's there and it can be upgraded much more easily.
Plus, like you said, you also have all the infrastructure built in at that point as well, right?
Yes.
You've got your high-speed internet.
Yes.
So okay, so we've got a space, we've got sponsors, we've got our equipment. You said one of the things was then bringing in the student body and bringing in the board. So how was that a difficult process? And that happens every year?
So with the students, we started with a large group of gamers who already were friends, and that helped a lot by saying, okay, we have the league players, and then saying, well, who else do we have? And at that time, we had to do it the old-fashioned way with posters that we had to put on walls and say, email these people if you are interested in playing these games or just want to show up for social. We opened a time frame in the room saying social and team-based gaming, so that people could just wander in and play some games and get to know everybody. And then we hosted little mini tournaments, which also helped bring in more people who wanted to watch and then become part of the club, because they do bond. It is a community, and that's really important for people to understand, that they're out there playing, whether they're at school or not. They're at home playing, they're with their friends playing. So if you get gamers coming into your events, they bring in other gamers. So it's just kind of natural. And if they have younger brothers and sisters, then they tend to want to come in and play as well.
And can you touch on that? Can you touch on that a little bit? Because I know, like with big DreamHack events, there's a massive community, right? You go to that, but they'll typically spend time with the people that play the games that they play. Do you find that true at the university level as well? Is there a lot of interaction in between the specific titles, the gaming community that plays, the fighting game community, which is always very tight and connected, as opposed to maybe the first-person shooters or the sports titles?
So I would say with it, definitely, I see the PC players play Smash. So a lot of times when we invite, like we had teams, we had a cooperative for a while with a school in Tokyo, and they would bring their students over for a week, and we'd visit different companies like Facebook and Intel and things. And then
I'd love you to talk more about that too. I'm sorry about how you set that up. That's pretty cool. Doing a back and forth with Tokyo.
Yeah. So awesome. That was very cool, and they loved it, and it was amazing because they spoke almost no English, and we had only one or two students who spoke Japanese, and yet they would play all day because basically they figured out what they meant, but the gaming was the game, right? And so they would bring over their league players or their Overwatch players, and for a long time it was primarily their league players, but then we'd start setting up some Smash setups in the back for the gamers that wanted to play Smash, and they'd drift over and start playing Smash. So definitely is a lot of cross gaming that does happen. There are some that are hardcore Smash that will only come in, will only play Smash, and they'll play for hours and then they'll leave. But we do have ones that'll play Smash, but then they'll play Dragon Ball Z, or then sometimes they'll play, we even have like Jenga set up. They will cross over and play different games because socially they have ones that they just enjoy for the fun. And a lot of them do like learning new games. We have a huge Pokemon Go community. That's probably the biggest community we have right now under the esports. And there's ways to make that competitive, which is really exciting. And of course, Niantic is constantly rolling out updates, which is making it even easier to make it competitive now. But though in that group too, some of them only play Pokemon Go, and other ones do come in and want to try out different games or want to try out the PC games. I think in the PC gamers themselves, I'm trying to think, we have like some Rainbow Six Siege players that play Overwatch, and we'll have some crossover between those games, but League players tend to just want to be League, but it doesn't mean they won't play other games socially.
Okay.
Like one of our League players, who's actually our League officer, is also the organizer for our Pokemon Go community. So,
Okay. So that was kind of to that point. So building out the student body. How did you do that? And is it five students that are kind of running the show? And at this point, are you just kind of overseeing and managing, and they're really running the show, or do you have a lot of input into where the program is going?
So the goal has always been for me to be like the liaison to handle the paperwork that has to be handled, strategize out what they're going to need based on where esports is going, and to think about how am I going to get you what you need in terms of funding, in terms of equipment, and then encouragement, a lot of encouragement.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because back in the day, small things like, hey, we're no longer blocked on the network was like massive. And today they come in and they're like, we need our own room. We're gonna have to go lobby the board. And I'm like, yeah, that's been done for 6 years. We're getting there. You have to be a little more patient. You have to understand where we started. Right now, it's easy to look around and say, well, Berkeley has their own esports facility. I'm like, yes, they do. And one day we will have one as well. Right. But we have slightly different resources. So it's going to be
but I think that again, to me, that's great though, that the students know that and understand that, because it makes it easier to lobby administration, right? When you can say the school down the street's got it and we don't.
Yeah. Right. And that's it. And that was the fun part, was in early days, like I said, we were the biggest group in all of NorCal. So it was kind of fun to be the people that were pushing forward and making all the changes, and now looking out and saying, wow, it's the landscape we thought it would be, right? Where now all of the schools are on board and supporting it. And so for them to run it, that's my goal. I prefer they run it. They should be running it. I'm there if they need help or they get stuck, or they want to organize a tournament. I'm all on board with that, but also making sure that, if you're going to open it at 9, that means we have to be there at 7. Are you sure gamers are going to be there at 9? Let's go back and think. So sometimes I'm in the mix talking, but usually I'm just trying to find out, do you want to have a Halo tournament? Okay, so what if we have it at Microsoft, because they'll host it and give us all kinds of free stuff, and they're really supportive, and we're going to be able to play in their windows and give them, some coverage in terms of the store itself and the product. I try to do all that type of liaisoning in terms of going out and talking to the companies and seeing, what they're imagining we could do for them and they can do for us.
And I think this to me is always a very interesting topic, is that when you look, again, if you look at the university level and there's a basketball team and a football team and a baseball team and a soccer team, and you've got all these different sports, every single one of them has a different head coach.
Yes.
In esports and gaming, again, a lot of times people just hear esports. The people that aren't in the industry just hear esports and they just think of it kind of as a collective, like it's one thing, right? But you've got all these. So I don't know if you told me, and if you did, I apologize, I don't remember. But you have a number of different teams. Yeah. So how many teams do you have? 5, 6, 7, 8?
So we have a League team, an Overwatch team, a CS:GO team, a Rainbow team, let's see. I guess you can count our Pokemon Go team.
Okay.
We're putting together Valorant. We had some Apex, so it kind of comes and goes. And that's another thing that's a little different with esports, is that as students come in, like we thought for sure we'd have like massive Fortnite players, and we just haven't really had the push. Do I think people are playing Fortnite? Oh yeah. Do they want to organize and come in and be a team? We haven't seen it yet. We'd be open to it, and we're always saying, if you're interested in starting a team, give me your contact information. I'll meet with you, and we'll talk about how we can build that out and where I can put advertising. But yeah, so each of those teams has an officer/coach. So they may be a player,
that's what I was going to ask.
Yes.
So they function as a coach, so they have to be somewhat skilled at the game, and then they need to be able to work with the other players to help them achieve a high level of performance.
Right. And that of course, and I know you know this super well, but that is an extremely challenging position, because you also have to really be good at team building, really know how to motivate people, how to provide feedback that doesn't, frustrate them to the point where they just don't want to play anymore, managing toxicity in the team, which we don't really have a whole lot of. It's usually nipped in the bud pretty quick. I've got some really good people that work with our group. And sometimes they graduate, and then there are alums, and they come back and help out with either the teams or the club, or just with our events. And they're really balanced. They have a good effect on the team, and trying to remind them that right now it's more important that we're out there competing, and that when we have like really good teams, it's super exciting, but it's not the most critical thing in the world to win if our team disintegrates because they all hate each other. So it's really about the team. Right. And then when you really have that good synergy, you're going to be good. It's hard not to be if you're, really functioning as a unit.
Yeah. And again, that's true of just about anything, right? Whether you're talking about traditional sports or a company or a family.
And that's why I'm like, this is a super important skill. I'm like, these guys are doing something amazing. When you watch them, that level of communication and that level of willing to put everything aside for, how it organized, I'm like, this is something you can totally bring into a school that traditionally isn't. You don't see people worry about classroom team building. I mean, I've been working on that for about 20 years, but it's not a common thing to say, this is a big element of my course. If you take my course, we're building a community inside the classroom, and that's going to be part of it. So, and I think gaming really brings that to the forefront.
And I want to get into that curriculum side of things in just a second, but the recruitment side is one thing that I kind of want to finish off on the competitive side. And on the recruitment side, and you just mentioned it, talking about, bringing students. You said you have high school students that come in and play sometimes with your gamers. So how do you see, how have things progressed? Where are we today? Where do you see us in like 5 years and maybe 10 years as far as the actual building out of a recruitment system, or having the college level of, and then being able to go to the pro level? So there's jumping into the pros from college, and there's not going to be many people that do that, just like traditional sports. Maybe it's 1 or 2%, but you have that opportunity, and then you also have the opportunity to go to all these other career paths within that. But then where do you see it right now building up from the grassroots level? The high schools are now starting to implement programs, maybe middle schools, and all the way down to what you would consider like your recreational or travel or academy stuff in traditional sports. How far are we along? And do you have like relationships with the high schools locally where, we can get players from this school and we can get players from this school? Or is it right now still just, it's only if a student reaches out to you that you actually know that they're a good gamer?
So we just started our more official high school recruitment. I now go out on the recruitment days and go out and there to talk about the esports and what we offer at the college. And
so do you have like a booth? Is that like something? Okay. Yeah. And so a school will have like a career day or a college day, and you're there with like 20 other. There. Okay.
Esports representing this college. Yep. Little booth, little table. And usually we like to bring a couple of the players will come. It's usually, in fact, it's almost always the FGC, because that's much easier to set up. If we can, we'll get there 2 hours ahead of time to make sure we snag a spot with an outlet, and then be able to have people playing, because all you have to do is see 2 people playing Smash and you get a crowd. And then right there, we can already start talking about what we offer and the different teams. And then we have sign up here if you're interested in any of these games. And so we just take their, either their Discord or their email, however they want to be contacted. And then I turn those over to the officers in charge of those games so that they can reach out and do direct contact. And we offer a lot of tournaments, and we always invite them. And the people that came from the high schools to the college turn around and go back and say, well, I know these guys who play, they're juniors or sophomores. And so they will contact them and bring them in. So they're gamers, like we said, they're like magnets. So if they are really excited about what's happening at your school, they'll turn right around and go back to the people that they knew that were in the year behind them, or 2 years behind them, or 3, because gamers aren't as concerned with staying with a single peer group. In terms of how we also have done it, there was programs like InterNexus, which I hope we're going to be able to revive. And that was a gaming anime expo that all the local high schools contributed to. So they would all participate in, and we always took a large area of whatever high school they decided to hold it at. And we would set up all of, a couple PC games. We'd set up we'd host console tournaments, and we would be right there to talk to all of the high school students from all the local high schools and saying, yeah, this is what we have. We have this, look, we have Alienware, it's Chroma. We have, a really good Smash group, good Dragon Ball Z. We also do, we'll have a couple of VR headsets. We'll show them all the different potential that we can have. Right. And that's been really successful, again, because people know who we are. So like I said, even if they aren't at our college this year, they will come in for our events because they know about our esports group.
And what do you think, how does administration feel right now? Do you feel like the program has definitely had an effect on recruitment?
I think it has. I think they finally are seeing the potential of it. I think it just was a tough sell. Starting back in 2014 when it just had no credibility, and it was one of those things where I don't know, it's hard to explain, but you would pitch it and you'd see them going, and they're, right. And I had people say things like, not on my watch, not while I'm alive, things like that. Right. And so, you had to just be persistent and go, okay, this it's gonna be like water and erosion. Eventually you're gonna hear it. But there's a whole lot of things changing over at the college now, and I think it just keeps getting easier. And I think for people that are starting right now, it's going to be a much easier. It's not going to be a 6-year grind. It's going to be much easier because there's so many people you can point to now that have set things up, and you can hear about the scholarships that are being offered, and you can, there are events that you can see, and they're still ongoing. Like when this shutdown happened, the first concern we had was for the FGC, because we knew that the PC guys, they already scrim online anyway. So it was just a matter of saying, okay, well then we're going to have to move everything online right now, but we can keep going.
Right.
Trying to handle the other gamers and the social gamers and things like Pokemon Go, which is pretty much at a dead stop, except for people doing it individually. That's been a little more challenging.
Right.
But I think that the school certainly sees now that esports is big. Now the big push is, what are they going to do with it? How are they going to, how to keep it from being managed or niched or limited? Because like I said, if you decide, okay, we're going to put it under athletics or we're going to put it under computer science, you've limited your recruitment outreach right there, because now you're telling people, okay, well, the serious esports people and the ones that are worthy of our college support are people in these departments. The other drawback to that is, if you're putting it under areas that are traditionally male dominated, you're now going to have a bit of struggle with inclusivity in terms of women gamers, which is because of the global nature of esports. You're dealing with so many different cultures and things that the problems with women in esports they're up and down in a lot of different ways and in a lot of different areas. But one of the things I think education has a huge opportunity to do is to make it so that it doesn't have any elements that would turn away female gamers, that you can say, look, it's completely, my department's a department of esports. Do you like to, in video gaming, do you like to play video games? Come take a class here. It's not going to be, subsumed into some other, area or some other, curricula that is automatically sort of an off-putting area. And not off-putting, that's not actually a good word for it, but just something that feels more niche, so that they're like, oh, well, I don't want to be a programmer, so I don't want to go take those esports classes under computer science, right?
Right.
And one of the guys, I just did a panel a couple weeks ago, and Jay Collins, Jay said, it's like you set up a video, like you want to make a film club. And so you start with these 5 guys who are like, well, what film do you want to see? Die Hard. And then you're like, awesome. So you have Die Hard night. And then the next time you have a film night, you're like, what do you want to see? And it's the same 5 guys. And they say, Die Hard 2. Right. And so after a while, it's not the film club, it's the Die Hard film club. And that's the risk of moving esports into education, is to realize that, you can say these, like, league will be run like an athletics team because the game is stable, it's got patches and updates, but infrastructure wise, it's not going to have a lot of change. But we leave open the door for dynamics for if that game phases out, we have another game that will come in. But esports, in terms of the whole collective umbrella, we have to leave that open. It's like what you said. It's like we just discovered sports. So do you say sports is football, or sports is football and hockey? There's also luging, equestrian 3-day eventing, rhythmic gymnastics, archery, cycling, high jump. There's so much under sports that if you have to look at esports as being just as large and diverse, and that the best way, if you're looking at it in terms of community and schools, is to keep that umbrella as open as possible, so that you're going to be able to pull everything in until it sorts itself out organically.
Yeah, those are 2 great analogies. I think those are 2 great analogies you just came up with to explain that, to keep it open and not have exclusivity, but keep it inclusive. And anybody should be interested, just like anybody should be interested in watching a movie. A movie is a huge, there's so many different areas that we can go, and so many different things that people like to see, but they're completely different. And sports is the same way. I remember, it was funny, I just thought about this, but the Hard Rock Casino had an event, and it wasn't that long ago. And they took a room, and they split the room in 2. And when I went to the event, I was like, I saw all these 65 and 70 and 75-year-old women walking into this room. And I saw the security guard, and I actually knew him from the Miami Marlins. And I'm like, do you know where this FGC game, I think it was a Tekken tournament or something. I said, do you know where this is? He's like, it's in there. I'm like, there's no way it's in there. It's like, that's not really the community. And he said, oh yeah, well, they put both of these communities in the same room. And I'm like, so the women were there for, it was like an insurance or a health conference or something. And then they had the FGC community, and there was no curtain, there was nothing on the other side. And it was a bunch of 20-year-old guys that were, you know, like you said, hanging over each other, watching. And I was like, this is, I don't think it's bad to put communities in, like to teach people about what's going on in the FGC community. But to me, that was almost like putting a group of people that like UFC and they're big fighting, you know, or boxing, and then a bunch of people that like tennis or golf. It's not that there can't be crossover. It's just, it's really not a natural fit, right? So you want to keep that open to everybody. Because if you, like you said, if it's just the UFC community and that's all that it has on college campus, it's going to turn off 85, 90% of people. 10% are going to be huge. They're going to be, you know, they're passionate about it. But so I love those two analogies, and I love the movie side as well. So talking about that now, and I know this is probably one of the areas that a college university doesn't need to go into, but I'm reading a lot, seeing a lot, and talking to a lot of people where it is, and that's the curriculum side. Because now it's not just about gaming, right? It's not just about that part of it. It's also the business of gaming, and it's the opportunities and the career paths in gaming. So how has that transpired for you? And when did you start building out your curriculum? And is it minors, majors, certificates? How do you go into the university and become part of that community and actually make that what your goal is?
I think it was probably only a few weeks after we had founded the club, and I was doing the room search, trying to determine that I had the right connectivity, trying to make sure I had the right equipment, and then working with them on setting up their events and getting everything put together, that I realized there's a lot going on in terms of just even one game with one event, or even just a regular casual club day. And I started looking, I heard about Robert Morris, so I looked at them and saw, okay, they're doing it like regular athletics, that's cool. And they're doing it with scholarships, that's cool. And then I went and found this school in Tokyo, and they were starting professional certification programs for pro gamers, but also for like people doing voiceovers, event hosting, setting up the hardware. Like they had all these different certificates already. Like Asia, as you know, is far ahead of us in terms of this. But I thought, I got to visit this school. So I was trying to find out who I could contact. And at the same time, only within 2 days, someone reached out from the school saying, hey, we saw that you're a big organization in San Francisco, and we want to bring some students out and check out what's happening in Esports in the Bay Area.
Wow, that's crazy manifesting right there, right?
This is just serendipitous. I looked at it, I was like, I told him, I go, I've been wanting to come see your school and trying to figure out how I was going to be able to swing a trip to Japan, which, was going to come from the professional Debi Lemon financial bank. But so they actually did come out and do that, and I got a chance to talk with them, and that got me talking to Corsair and talking to EA and Facebook and different people in industry, and saying, well, people have this passion for games. There's a huge variety of games. And right now you're recruiting from high school. You're not even worried about hiring people from college. And if you are hiring them from college, you're not really caring what their degree's in, because you just want them to know gaming and understand and have a passion for it. And then, hopefully they understand how to do hardware engineering, or you're training them. What is it you would want them to know coming in looking for a job? And so I started amassing that information and looking at it. And I realized the one thing that was definitely missing, no matter who I spoke with, was a general overview of what encompasses video gaming in terms of the community, the industry, the history of the grassroots movement, and then also esports and how it's, because of course using the name esports makes you think sports, how is that integrating into the sport world, and having that be the basis for a curricula, and then take it from there and see, well, how's it rolling out? How's it impacting other professions? And so I did in 2017, I ran a 5-course series for certification, just level 1 professional certification in esports. And it was a beta test, and that was really fun because they gave me 24 hours to come up with 12 people in order to be able to run the class. Fortunately, like again, you get one gamer, you get them all. So it was they supported it, and we were able to run it. And I was able to bring people in from industry and say, you know, you're the head of finance over at EA Games, but in counting, you know, how does that tie in with esports for you? And it's like, well, I was always a passionate gamer, and I'm able to now do both things. Or same with somebody who was dealing with security, or we had Achilles, who's one of the shoutcasters, and he's amazing. And he talked about how his passion for esports took him where he was going and what he suggested people do if they want to be a shoutcaster. And so and I talked with people like Stephen Ellis, who was Snoopy from Evil Geniuses, and he was at Facebook at that time working on their esports division or department, and he had done that without a college degree. So again, it was looking at what are the skills and things that you have, what is it you know that makes you attractive, and how can we as educators prepare you, give you a leg up in what's going to be a very highly competitive industry, and how do you take your talents in the field you're interested in and merge that with your passion for gaming so you can take it with you. And that's kind of the long-term goal, is to say, okay, you want to be in real estate, but you want to do esports real estate, which is a real thing.
Right.
Trying to find housing for teams and having to understand the electrical needs, the connectivity needs, how do they need to be in separate rooms? Can you bunk them together? Do you need more than one kitchen because of different cultural differences? Same thing with construction, esports construction, building those building those arenas requires a lot of cabling to be put into place to anticipate all the connectivity and the connectivity that's yet to come that we can't even anticipate right now. So what do you need to know for those type of professions? And I know you're looking at, you've got, you know, esports law, esports finance, esports contract law, esports cosmology, which is something I didn't know existed until I spoke to somebody. But when you're on stage doing like a league game and you have all the heavy lights on you, there's a certain kind of makeup you have under stage lights, but they have the extra light coming up from the computer screens. So
Right.
you have to account for that. So it takes a knowledge of how that works in order to actually be somebody who can handle.
So funny you say that. Yeah, it's so funny because when you think about, like, right now, you and I mean, we didn't have anybody do our makeup or handle anything. And the number of Zoom conferences, I haven't seen the numbers, but I mean, just the number of Zoom conferences and Microsoft Teams it's probably, you know, gone up, who knows, 500% over the last 3 months.
Yeah.
And so I think that's, even though we'll go back to some of the traditional things we've done in the past, it's part of the future right now. So yeah, there's all of these opportunities and all these industries. So what I used to say, and I think you and I might have briefly talked about that, or I still say this, is that I don't care what you do right now, whatever it is, whether it's the medical field, whether you're in finance, whether you're a lawyer or attorney, I would look at esports and gaming. I would look at that space because the industry is so massive and it's growing so fast and it's global that there's so many opportunities and there's not a lot of experts in these different fields. And I think just in the law field alone, I mean, whether you talk about contracts or IP law, or it is absolutely massive. And it's the thing that's great about esports and gaming is, and you said it right at the beginning, which I love, and we don't have to complicate it. It's fun. So I think that's what happens. Like often when I'm talking to people about esports and gaming that know nothing about it, I generally start to have more and more energy, and I get more and more excited the more I'm talking. And it's because it's so much fun. I'm not talking about dry topics and I'm sorry to say this to people in life insurance, but life insurance, or whether it's your health plan, or whether it's, those things aren't that exciting. This is a really exciting industry. So anywhere you get in, you can kind of become part of that passion and part of that culture. And I think it's a lot of fun. So I think it's a great space to look at. So your curriculum right now, you said 2014 looking at 2017, really start drawing it up. In 2020, where is it now? Do you guys, can I go to school there for X number of classes? And is there a minor or a major, or how far off are we?
So right now you could go and enroll in Esports 101, which is there for fall. Some things we had to kind of put on hold because we're going to be fully online in the fall. So we were kind of hoping to work in the tournaments and work in some of the other courses to give practical credit for practical application, but I'm not sure where that is right now until I know where we're going with the school, how much more to build. But I'm continuing. I have the other courses written out for the next two sets. My goal right now is I'd like to have a minor or even an AA or AS going out, but a professional certification and transferable courses, minimum. That's what I want right now. And that's what we have. So I have a course that now will articulate to other colleges that also have their own beginning esports courses. So they're all a little varied because there is that one thing that's going to be a lot of jockeying. It's kind of like AR platforms, like whoever finally gets the internet of AR will be setting the baseline for all their AR applications. Well, esports is like you design your first class. What do you consider to be esports? And so some courses will be more niched and smaller, and some courses will cover more. So that's what we'll be exploring, I think, in terms of just college courses and academia in general is trying to get that bigger vision and saying we need to lay out a lot of general stuff and then not reinvent the wheel. If we have entertainment design technology certification program right now. So that's taking those courses and saying, hey, let's do an esports degree or an esports certificate, and you want to focus on event hosting. Okay, then here are courses that already exist in entertainment design technology, which will work for you. You want to be a shoutcaster? We have a broadcasting department, and we also have radio. The skills from both of those come in really nicely, along with some theater courses as well to do that. If you want to do esports business, then let's go out and look at the entrepreneurship, courses that we have in our business program, and let's bring those in and then overlap it, and then gradually develop those tie-ins. But I think what you're going to see, really seriously looking out 5 or 6 years, it's going to become its own thing. It's right now you can kind of feel it, but as it continues to grow, it's really hard to predict it. And the other problem, of course, is looking at it school-wise. They're like, oh, $1 billion, I want a piece of that. And it's like, it's not like it's a solid brick of gold. Right. It's like I think of it like the Mississippi River goes down, and then suddenly there's this massive delta with lots of little tributaries and marshlands where everything is booming and growing, and you have this robust ecosystem. But it's really hard to go down and say we're going to put a dam on one of those tributaries and try to build up power. It isn't quite formed yet. We're right in that exciting stage where everything is coming up and we're looking at it, and it's just amazing. But how it's going to become something that's easier to understand and describe and to formulate a degree program for it. Like you said, there's no one esport. So having an esports degree is like having a sports degree. You're going to have things under it that say where you want to focus, or minor it and attach it to whatever other degree program you're doing so that you can have that affected. Like there's going to be esports neuroscience. There already is, really, but it'll be more official. There'll be, ocular motor research, which is based specifically in gaming right now. There's all kinds of research like that. So those will become programs. And if there's something like a Department of Esports, it's going to be really easy to house it and keep it interconnected.
I would think, and I'm not sure, because again, I throw myself back to when I was in college, and when I first went into college, which probably dates me if people know anything about it, but sports management was really just starting. And there weren't that many universities. I think there was Springfield, it was Ithaca. I'm from the Northeast, Syracuse, New York. So there may have been some stuff on the West Coast, but there wasn't that much. And so exactly what you're saying, I think almost every university, college has a program along those lines right now in a sports management degree. So you've got learnings there, right? Best practices. So a lot of that is, yes. And so it's building it out. And I'm wondering, like you said, everybody's kind of jockeying, right? But will it become where everybody shares? Is there a collective right now? Are you part of a group of other university professors that are all discussing this? And you kind of say, okay, yeah, well, the first thing we need to do is have Esports 101. right? Because that gives everybody a general overview of the land, and it's not going to get really deep, but it's going to be broad, and we're going to learn a lot just about the industry, and then that'll help you decide if you want to pick a specific area that you want to go.
Right.
Do you work with some people discussing that now, or right now is it just really Dr. Debi is just kind of doing that?
I do actually try to talk with a lot of different professors. There are some that are, that have the same kind of vision. There are some that are just, we want to get these courses cranked out right now as fast as possible. It's not really, I would say there's not really a consortium, so to speak. There are different groups popping up, but they all have kind of a different end goal. So I think we're still in that stage, just as educators as well, of trying to make sure that we're not putting it down a traditional path, and we're not, having people that aren't passionate about gaming suddenly jumping into it. There is a lot of that kind of frenzy happening right now. It's also complicated by the fact there are very, very, very few, and I can think of really only one other right now, maybe two. I can think of two. Faculty advisors who are long-term advisors. As you know, in most colleges, you're the faculty advisor for maybe a semester, maybe a year, and then you move on because it's a voluntary thing you do, and then students just need someone to sign up on the paperwork. Esports is different. It needs somebody who is knowing that it's going to be in for the long haul, and that it's its own reward that you're doing it because you're following that vision. And so they have a sense of stability, because I've watched really good esports groups at some of the other colleges here in the Bay Area just collapse because they don't have any type of consistency and they don't have any guidance. So they're just looking for someone to sign the forms. And without that sense of structure, they can't manage themselves. Esports, even as a club, is very big and complicated. And to keep it growing can be a challenge if you're having to reset every semester or every year.
Okay. Do you have any predictions as far as 2025 where we'll be? Because we've made some big steps since 2014, right? The last 5-6 years.
Well, before the shutdown, I would have said it's pretty obvious it's going to be in the Olympics. It was in the East Asian Olympics. It would have been there in Tokyo. And I think they would have ultimately come up with something in Paris, because I know they were waiting because nobody knew what the landscape was going to look like and what games were you going to pick. But I think it would have been inevitable. I think now, I think it still will happen. I worry about the arenas that people were building and whether that's going to still be able to move forward, or whether, because a lot of them were in the planning stages, will they be able to remodel? Because, as you know, they really do want to be together, seeing it like any other fan of any other industry. But I think because it can be online and because it is electronic, there are going to be really easy ways for people to be able to continue to have these competitions and be able to watch live streams and be able to have, viewing parties where you already can do that on a lot of different platforms. And I know Facebook has a lot of really good stuff for their viewing parties where people can comment. I think the big push will be augmented reality. I think we're going to see augmented reality games, which is where people can go outside and not have to worry about calibration in a room, but actually be able to function in a real environment, but be able to then play against other players. And we'll be able to sit with other players virtually. I think those options really aren't that far out. I think we're really going to see that. But in terms of video gaming and academia, I think we'll see more push from the high schools, hopefully in the middle schools. I think England and some of the other countries are so far ahead of us. I'd love to see that already be an integrated part of middle school and high school. I think that because it's online, and if they can integrate that into the curriculum, it'll give some grounding to the students that are right now at home, and they're trying to do traditional coursework of traditional structure in a very unstructured, untraditional environment on Zoom platforms, which I can't imagine wouldn't have appealed to me when I was a teenager or younger. So I can't imagine it's going to be wildly popular for them. I'm like way off topic. Sorry about that. But looking out, I'm like, I'm going someplace different now. I'm talking about myself as a child.
Well, no, I mean, I asked about the future, and this is the future right now that we're in, right? So I think you're right on topic, and it is interesting to me. I think the biggest challenge to me for my kids is I just look at their physical activity. Before I didn't mind. I actually, think that it's a great experience to have this opportunity to get online and be social, especially during the pandemic. I mean, they adapted so quickly, and it was amazing how they really they weren't affected that much. However, meaning the social side, because they play games already, and they're very social. But I do see them settling in, and they're both athletes. They both play soccer, baseball, football.
Yeah.
You know, they play all the traditional sports as well as game. And so now it's okay, guys. You've got to go outside and do some PE. You've got to go ride your bike. You've got to because it's limited in the sense, again, they can't do these things with their friends, right? So if they can't do it with their friends, it makes it more challenging. So that's one of the areas that I. You know, and the Wii came out whenever, a long time ago, but I'm almost like I want them to, they can still be on their headset. They can still be on the Xbox or their PC, but I'd like to see them doing some movement, you know, having some of that structured into the day. So depending on how much longer we are in this, and from what you just said, and I did hear that about the California schools, that you may not actually be back on campus until next year. That's we're talking 6, 7, 8 months. Yeah. So we need to figure out how to structure that physical activity in there.
I totally agree with you. That is definitely one of our biggest concerns, because that was actually something even our gamers did early on. Was one of our first president was of the club. He was big on, okay, then we'll have to do like a hike, or we'll go walk Lake Elizabeth and do Pokemon Go, or we'll have a Tai Chi class. Like, they were very much aware that they didn't want to sit for hours and hours, and they don't. They're very hyper. They've got a lot of energy. And certainly I think now I listen to what other kids are going through, but I also even just know from my own personal schedule, I'm on Zoom calls, you know, sometimes, some days, like today's not bad, I got one.
Right.
But other days I'll have like 6 or 7, and I'm like, wow, I've been sitting in this chair strapped to this screen, you know, for 6, 7, 8 hours. And I would normally never have that, even though I do a lot of online work. I don't sit in a day and just with a headset on for that long of a period of time, you know, in a meeting, you know, or, you know, just hearing stuff being said. It's not a hyper focus. And I like that what you were saying about your kids is that when they're playing games, they can be very focused and very social. And then you break away and you've got your body back and you go do something that continues that same process, but now in a whole different way, right? A whole different, you know, set of stimulus and activity. And you have to have that balance. And I think that's another stereotype that people have of gamers, is that they are alone and spend 12 hours at their computer and eat Cheetos.
Yeah, that just doesn't exist. That changed. I don't know if it was the advent of the internet, where people were able to, you know, talk, you know, to each other instantly, whereas you couldn't do that when I was growing up. I couldn't play with anybody else. When I got on and played Pac-Man or Zork back in the day, right? It was me, and that was it. So it's just true. But you did, and I want to close up. But I did. The one thing you said about AR that I found very interesting is that really could be one of those solutions to the problem of being stationary, right? Because with AR, based on what you said, I don't know if it's throwing on the glasses and going outside. I don't know if it's having a handheld device, but you're interacting more, like you said, with Pokemon. You're interacting. You're going out. You're hiking. You're moving around. You're doing something. So it's much more active. And I love the Tai Chi. I've been over to China, and I saw people on the lake in Guangzhou doing Tai Chi. I thought it was amazing. I could see that being like a guided game, you know, because there's so many of those fighting games, especially that have like an Asian theme to them as well, where you're doing Tai Chi with the characters on the screen, especially if it's through some type of augmented reality mode. And
that's. I mean, when I make that point for AR, when I talk about AR development and where that's going, it took years. Like 12 years for the internet. I think the internet took 4 years to get 50 million users. And I know it took YouTube a year to get 50 million users. It took Pokemon Go 19 days. And I think that tells you how much people want to be able to play games and yet still be in their bodies outside. They want to integrate those two things. So I think when they reach that threshold, that's going to start a whole new wave of gaming, because that's like the perfect game. You're in a game that still requires everything that esports requires, but allows you to participate in it physically if you want to. And it just doesn't get much better than that.
Yeah. Wow. So is there anything we missed? Is there anything we didn't cover that you want to talk about?
Not we'll probably have to talk again, because there's a whole lot.
You
can talk about esports all day.
I know. for sure.
But no,
thank
this
you so
is
much.
great.
Yeah, I really do appreciate it. I know, again, you got up earlier over on the West Coast, so I really appreciate that. And now you've done your one Zoom call for the day. You actually have,
Yes.
I don't know what you're going to do the rest of the day.
I'm taking my dog to the park.
Oh, nice. Nice. Well, thank you so much, Debbie. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great talking with you.
Have a
Have a good one.
All right. Ciao.
Ciao.
I'd like to thank Debbie for sharing her time, experience, and knowledge with us today. I'm so impressed with her story as she organically built the esports program at Ohlone College before many had even heard of esports. She's truly a force. You can listen again now, and you can also find timestamp segments of the show, links to Debbie's social pages, and more information about our company, projects, and media in the show notes. If you enjoyed our conversation, please let us know. Continue the discussion with me across all social platforms and become a member of the Ultimate Gamer community today by subscribing at ultimategamer.com. We release 2 shows a week on Tuesday and Thursday, so be the first to join us for some outstanding upcoming guests and or dive back into the library of previous Level Up pods to hear some of the most brilliant minds in the space. Experts like Director of Corporate Partnerships at the Houston Outlaws, Herb May, Regional Head of Marketing at Evos Esports, Alan Fang, and CEO of the Ultimate Gamer, Steve Suarez, just to name a few. You can find all of these episodes and more on the Ultimate Gamer website, on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your pods. And finally, please like, rate, and review the show. It helps us reach the gaming community to spread the word and share the wisdom of our guests, as well as some of the most thought-provoking stories in the industry. Shout out, as always, to the Ultimate Gamer. I look forward to being with you on the next Level Up podcast.